Hello, my sweet reading friends. I have been hit with another one of my migraines at last a few days, so we are struggling today. With that though, I figured we would just do a little fun and cozy sit down chit chat type of video for my June and July wrap up. I don't think I've done a wrap up video, I think since like April. I don't know, it's been a really long time. A lot of the books that I usually read throughout the month I do reading vlogs of, so I feel like doing reading wrap ups are kind of repetitive, but then again I think about how not everybody watches like every single one of the videos on my channel, so I figured even if you have seen the reading vlogs of all these books, it still might be fun just to talk about all the things that I read throughout the months. So I technically read a total of 15 books in June and July, but I DNF'd one, so I think it's like technically 14 books that I actually fully read, and it was also a soft DNF. It wasn't like a hard DNF. I do eventually want to get back to it, but like right now I was just getting irritated with it. It wasn't really what I was in the mood for, and I just need to put it down before I give it a really bad rating for no reason. And that one was actually my most recent read. So I'm first going to be going through the books I read in June, and then I'll be talking about the books that I read in July, but I wanted to first start with the book that I soft DNF because that was my most recent read, and that was actually Reckless by Lauren Roberts. Please don't hurt me. Hear me out, okay? I already had a mixed relationship with Powerless. I had a love-hate relationship with it. I didn't know if I liked it or if I didn't like it. I gave it, I think, like a 3.75 because I was like, I don't know if I wanted to rate this book a 3 stars or a 5 stars. In Powerless, there was a lot of things that I really enjoyed about it, and there was a lot of things that I really did not enjoy about it. So I just had very like conflicting feelings. So going into Reckless, I did not have very high expectations, but I did have high hopes. So with Reckless, I started it, I think, I don't know, last week, and I think I just really did not like the whole back and forth. I enjoy enemies to lovers. I actually really like that trope, but what I don't like is when it goes from enemies to lovers to enemies to lovers, back to enemies to lovers, back to enemies to lovers again. That I find very irritating, and so that was just like my biggest problem with this book. I think I got like 130 pages in before I soft DNF'd it because I was like, I just feel like I'm getting whiplash because we keep going back and forth. We threaten to end each other's lives, and then we start making out, and then we threaten to end each other's lives, and then we love each other again, and it's like, what? So that was just throwing my brain for a loop, and I was not having a good time. But I also at the same time kind of was eating it up still, so again, just have really conflicting feelings about it. So now that my soft DNF is out of the way, let's go into the books that I read in June. So the first one that I read is Shadow and Bone, and then I also read Siege and Storm in the same, I think, like week. Shadow and Bone, I think I ended up giving like a 4 star. I really enjoyed this book, actually. I know there's a lot of like mixed reviews out there about this book and this series, but the first one at least I really enjoyed. I think it also helped that I watched the show, so I already kind of could picture everything in my head, and I already somewhat knew what was gonna happen. But I don't know, I read this book so fast. The font is nice and chunky. The writing is just like really easy to read and digest in a quicker pace. I really enjoy this world. I really enjoy these characters, and I just had a good time with it. But then going into Siege and Storm, I really love the world. I really love the characters still, but I feel like there's a lot of issues with the plot and the pacing. I feel like this book was very slow, and then it kind of had like this explosive ending, which sometimes I don't mind. And with this book, I also was having a good time. Like, even though it was slow, I was still never really like bored necessarily, and I always, like I said, I always was having a good time, and I really enjoyed the new characters that were also introduced in this book. I don't know, I just feel like the plot was kind of missing. It didn't feel like super high stakes. It also had a little bit of like petty drama, I guess. Like, I don't know, I didn't love it as much. So now going into the third book, I still have Ruin and Rising left to read, and I don't have high expectations for it, honestly. I am just gonna read it to kind of get this series done with, but it sucks because I do really like this world. So with my books that I read in June and July, I also read some on my Kindle, so I'm trying to make sure that I don't skip over those. But the next one that I read in June was actually Funny Story by Emily Henry, and I ended up giving this book 5 stars. This is actually one of my favorite books of the year so far. This was technically my first Emily Henry book that I have read like through and through, because I did start Happy Place not terribly long ago, but I just wasn't like feeling it at the time that I was reading it, so I didn't like soft DNF it. I just kind of like put it down for a while and just forgot to pick it back up. But I do have it on my shelf right now and I really want to finish it soon. But with Funny Story, this one follows our main character Daphne and Miles. So Miles is her ex-fiance's new fiance fiance's ex. So Daphne was engaged to this dude, and this dude ended up leaving her for his best friend. So she was kind of stuck in a really crappy place because she had to move out of her and her ex-fiance's house. So after that whole debacle, she ends up moving in with her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex, and there starts the story of Daphne and Miles. This book was hilarious. It was heartbreaking. It was emotion-provoking. I don't cry in books very often, but I sobbed in this one. I think that's also because it just kind of hit home for me. Like, there was a lot of conversations that kind of centered around things that have like happened in my life and like things that I have gone through. I really connected with and loved both of these characters. I just love the way Emily Henry can make you kick your feet and giggle and also make you really like think and feel. I love when books have that balance of being lighthearted and funny and also being very like deep and emotional, and I feel like it was just balanced out so well in this book. I love Daphne and Miles' story so much, and this book I feel like will definitely forever live in my heart. And I read another Emily Henry book in July, which I'll talk about in a minute, and I definitely think that this one is my favorite of her writing so far, and I fear that nothing will compare to this one. The next one that I read is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, and this one is another one that is like one of my top favorites of the year. I didn't end up rating it 5 stars, and that was solely because it just had some like plot issues and some pacing issues that I didn't absolutely love, but everything else about this book I absolutely adored. This book follows our main character Dora, and when she was younger, some fairy of sorts came and like stole half of her soul. So she kind of grows up like not thinking and feeling the way that like everyone else does, and especially being in the Regency era, that can be really, really hard because you have to be like very proper and act a certain way, and that's just not how like she operates. And then in comes Elias, which is the ill-mannered Lord I think it's Sorcier or Sorcier. I don't know how to say that word correctly, but he is just, like I said, this ill-mannered, insufferable character, and Elias is kind of on a mission to help Dora rekindle the other half of her soul and like fix her condition. But the longer Dora spends with Elias, the more she begins to suspect that one may indeed fall in love even with only half a soul. So it just follows along like their story, but also there's kind of this subplot of there's this like illness or disease that is plaguing the children of this town in this world. So Elias is kind of on a mission to like figure out what's going on there. But this book, it just explores so many things, and there's so many conversations and so many like instances in this book where it just makes you think and feel so deeply. It was a very profound book for me, and I cried in this book as well. I don't think I've ever highlighted as many quotes in a book than I did in this book. Something else that I really enjoyed about it is that it kind of explored the emotional hardships and just the emotional state of the people in the Regency era and how hard and like lonely that was to just like pretend and act a certain way for the sake of like what was proper in that day and time. This book is one that will forever live in my heart, brain, and soul. The next one that I read in June is The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, and this one I rated a 3.75. I know this is like a very, very loved book, but for some reason it just didn't hit the way that I thought it was going to. So this one follows our main character Hannah and our male main character Jack. Hannah is a bodyguard and Jack is, I believe, a famous actor, and his mom gets sick, so he has to fly home to kind of take care of her, but he needs a bodyguard because he has a stalker. He doesn't want his family to know that he needs a bodyguard or that he has a stalker, so they pretend to fake date. I just don't know if I love the whole fake dating trope. I don't think it's my favorite. And like I said, I don't know why, but I just didn't really connect with these characters that much. I thought they were cute, and I thought their story was fun, and I did like their interactions, and I did really, really love the interactions and the connections between Hannah and Jack's family. I thought that was really cute, but other than that, it just wasn't anything special for me. And there was even some parts in this book that I was kind of like cringing at, so I don't know. I really love Catherine Center's writing with the couple books that I've read so far from her, but I think this one was my least favorite so far. Next, I read Love Theoretically by Allie Hazelwood. This one I also gave a 3.75. I thought that I loved Allie Hazelwood books because I love the idea of it. Like, I love women in STEM. I love rom-coms. You know, I thought that this would be just another book that I really enjoyed, because The Love Hypothesis, I think I gave like a 4 star. I really enjoyed that one, but then I read Love on the Brain and I just got super irritated associated with the female main character, and I just didn't love that story as much as I thought I would. So going into Love Theoretically, I had high hopes because I have seen a lot of really good things about it, but after reading it, I don't think I love Allie Hazelwood books as much as I thought I did. This one follows our main character Elsie, and I believe the dude's name is also Jack. Wait, is it? Yes, his name's Jack too. Oh, that's funny. So Elsie is a theoretical physicist, and she also is like a fake girlfriend for like her second job. So of course, her fake boyfriend's brother is like a really well-known experimental physicist. So there's just a lot of like workplace tension and awkwardness between them. So it just follows like their story. I don't know, with this one, I feel like I like the relationships in Allie Hazelwood books, but I also feel like they just get really unnecessarily physical. And the more Allie Hazelwood books that I read, I feel like she makes the female main characters very, I don't know how to put this in like nice words. She makes them very oblivious. Let's just say that. Like the guys will be doing everything right to like show them that they care, and even if they aren't, like obviously they're not gonna be like perfect men, they very obviously are interested in the female main character, and the female main character is always like, no, you hate me, like how could you feel this way about me, and that would never happen, and he's like very obviously trying to pursue her, and she's just very like oblivious to it. And so like that irritates me because I'm like, I feel like you're just playing dumb right now, and I don't know, so I just get really annoyed with the characters in her books sometimes. And like I said, I do feel like there's a lot of unnecessary smut in her books now. So I just don't think that Allie Hazelwood is an author for me, but I still might pick up some of her books depending on if the premise sounds intriguing enough for me. Next, I read The Housemaid is Watching. This is the third book in the Housemaid trilogy. I love these books so much. The first one I rated a 5-star, the second one I rated like a 4.5, and then this one I think I rated like a 4.25, 4.5-ish. This one was definitely my least favorite, I think, of the 3 books, but that's also just because I feel like it felt a lot different than the first 2 books because it follows our main character Millie, but it's like 10 years later. So she's got like an established family. She's in a completely different like place in her life. And although like I do feel like it was good for the story, but I don't know, it felt like it was a little bit disconnected from the first 2 books. I don't really know. I can't really say what it's about without like giving things away. But if you haven't read the first and second books, I highly recommend you do because they are so good. The last book that I read in June was Red Rising, and this one, again, please don't hurt me, but I gave this one a 3.75. Thinking about it more after it's done, I think I might give it a 3.5, or I don't know, maybe stick to 3.75, but this book, I feel like just did not work with my brain. I know that this is a very hyped up and very loved book, but for me, I don't know if it was just like my brain wasn't really working at that time, or maybe I should have listened to it on audiobook and read it at the same time. Like, I don't know what was going on, but nothing in this book was sticking in my brain. I felt like I was very lost with everything. I felt like there was a huge lack of world building. Like, they would talk about all these things, but never explain like what those things were or like how this world worked. So it was all very hard for me to follow. I could definitely see though how this book is a favorite for a lot of people because like I get the hype, but I didn't feel the hype, if that makes sense. If you don't know what this one is about, it follows our main character Darrow, and in this world, there's like different colors to kind of say like what your status is. So reds are like the very bottom of the list. They are pretty much the slaves, and pretty much I think that they're like trying to make Mars habitable, livable. And then you find out a bunch of stuff about like what's really going on, and he kind of rebels, and so he tries to like work his way up in the ranks to pretty much get revenge. But yeah, I don't know, just throughout this book I just felt like I could not follow it at all, and so I think that really ruined my like reading experience. But again, I know that's just a me thing, so I would definitely still recommend this book, but just know that it's a lot for your brain. And my first read of July was Fable by Adrienne Young, and this one I think I gave, I'm looking at my Goodreads right now, I think I gave it a 3.75. This book was another one, and this is where I'm like, was my brain just in a really weird spot during this time? Because with this one, I kind of felt the same way, to where I could not like really follow along with the story, and I couldn't like imagine what was going on. I felt like the pacing was kind of weird, and I definitely felt like there wasn't as much going on as like I thought there was going to be. I did really like these characters, and I really loved the vibes of this book, but I just feel like it was not nearly as interesting as I thought it was going to be. So this one follows our main character Fable, and when Fable was younger, She like grew up on her father's ship because her father is like this extremely well known and like one of the biggest like captains, I guess you would say, in this world. So she was kind of like abandoned by her father in a place that is really hard for a young girl to survive on her own. So she's kind of on a mission now to go and like find her father. And I did read this for a reading vlog, and I also said this in the reading vlog, but there's like a sentence on the back that says, "Fable takes you on a spectacular journey filled with romance, intrigue, and adventure." I definitely feel like there was adventure, but there was very, very, very little romance and not a whole lot of intrigue. So I think it was just a little bit misleading for my brain. The romance that we did get, there was really only like 2 scenes where it even like resembled romance, but other than that, we really did not get much of that, which I think I was also disappointed in because I felt like there was so much potential between these 2 characters and it was just not explored on very much. The next book that I read in July was The Teacher by Frida McFadden. This one is also one that is just very, I feel like it's just very controversial because it follows topics that I would obviously never support in real life. But in this fiction book, I just ate it up. It was a little bit icky, and like I said, I definitely don't support or condone anything that happens in this book, but I feel like Frida McFadden is just such a good storyteller, and she's really good just with like drama and mystery and just really keeping me hooked like from the beginning. This one I think technically follows 3 point of views, and that is Eve, Nate, and I believe Addie, yeah, is her name. So Eve and Nate are a married couple, and they both teach at this high school, and Addie is one of their students. There was a scandal in the school with Addie, and Eve is just a little bit weary of having Addie in her class, and especially having her in Nate's class. I don't know like what else to say about it without giving things away, but this kind of gives Miller's Girl vibes-ish, but with like a mystery thriller twist. And I liked the ending. It felt like very empowering. And then there's like a little plot twist at the very, very, very end, I think in like the epilogue, and that just like ruined something. Like it just made me feel so weird. So there was that, but I don't know, I read this book so fast. I think it's like a 400-page thriller, and I flew through it. The next book that I read is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, and I just love this. Is another one of my favorite books of the year so far. This one follows our main character Liz, and she is like a hopeless romantic, and when her childhood love moves back to the neighborhood, she seeks out her rival neighbor's help, Wes, to like get this guy to go out to prom with her. Liz also just recently lost her mother, so this book it follows Liz along this journey of navigating grief with her recent loss, learning things about herself, and to quote the back, re-examine everything she thought she knew about love and rethink her own perception of what happily ever after should really look like. So it also just follows like Liz and Wes's story, which this entire book was it was adorable. I was so giddy. I was quite literally giggling and kicking my feet throughout a lot of this book. I loved the depth that this book brought, even though it was like a silly, cute little like teenage romance. I just really could not recommend this book more. The next book that I read in July was Heartless Hunter. This one, I believe I gave 4 stars, and this one follows our main character Rune, and she is secretly a witch in a time where witches are being hunted. So she is a witch hunter, and she ends up fake dating this witch hunter to get like information out of him and stuff, and then they pretty much end up falling for each other. This entire book it's very like cat and mouse. It's very much playing with your emotions, and I loved it and hated it at the same time. This was another book that I flew through. The pacing was a little bit off, like it was kind of slow throughout, I want to say the first like 60% of the book, but it was kind of like one of those instances where I was never really bored. Like I was still reading through it pretty quickly, even though the pacing itself was kind of slow. I will say though, I did not love the ending. I feel like it wasn't necessarily rushed, but again, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Reckless, to where I was like, I don't like when it's enemies to lovers to enemies to lovers to enemies to lovers. I don't like going back and forth, and I feel like that's what this book kind of did. And especially the ending, it's one of those endings where there's like no closure. Like you really have to read the next book to feel any sort of closure, and I don't like when books end like that. But I still had a really good time with this book, and I would definitely still recommend it. It's one of those ones that I don't think it's going to be for everyone. The next book that I read was Listen for the Lie. This is an adult mystery thriller that follows our main character. I cannot remember her name, but a few years ago, her best friend was murdered, and she ended up getting like blamed for the murder. And in the present day, there is a true crime podcaster who comes to her hometown to do a podcast about like what really happened. And so we're just following along that journey, and I had a really good time with it. I love when books have like documentary or podcast elements, like the reappearance of Rachel Price. I loved that book because it was like a docu-series type of book, you know? And I just really like those elements in mystery thrillers. I will say though, this one, I think I gave it like a 3.75, and I did read it pretty quickly and I did enjoy it, but it was kind of one of those books where everyone's just kind of icky. Like everyone's kind of suspicious. There's a lot of really weird and toxic relationships. Everyone's just kind of icky. And so that was weird for me, and I didn't love like that portion of the book. But the mystery itself was pretty intriguing. It wasn't anything crazy good for me, but it's definitely a book that like, it's just fun. It's just a good time. It definitely is one that I would still like recommend to a lot of people. And my last read of July, other than Reckless, was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I ended up giving this a 4.5. I don't know, I think I'm gonna lower it though to a 4-star. This one follows our main characters August and January, and they are both authors. And January is kind of going through a hard time. She recently lost her dad and kind of like inherited his lake house, I guess. So she goes to live in this lake house for a little bit, and her next door neighbor ends up being her like rival author, and that's August. So one day they kind of make this wager, I guess, to where she's going to try and write his type of writing and he's going to try and write like her genre of writing. So we're just kind of following their story as they, I don't know, like write different types of books and their little like love story. I connected with these characters, but not nearly as much as I did in Funny Story with Daphne and Miles. I thought this book was fun. I thought it was a good time. I did love the like deep and emotional element, but I really don't know. I can't pinpoint exactly what it is that did not hit for me about this book, but it just wasn't as good for me as Funny Story. But it is definitely still one that I would recommend. It did not feel as atmospherically summery as I thought it would. For it to be called Beach Read, I thought that it was going to be, I don't know, just more of like a summery read, and although like it kind of was, I just didn't really get those vibes as much as I expected to. Like I said, overall still a good time, still recommend it, still loved it. But that wraps up my June and July wrap up. Let me know what your favorite books were of June and July. I love you guys so much, and I appreciate your guys' love and support throughout my entire YouTube journey, my entire content creation journey. I just seriously love and appreciate you guys so ridiculously much. And I hope you guys have the most amazing August. I am going to try and post as frequently as possible, but like I said in my last video, I am getting married this month, so I am going to be crazy slammed for the next couple weeks. Anyway, I will see you guys in my next video. Mwah.